James Holloway wasn't the kind of guy who believed in curses or bad luck. He was just looking for a good deal. That's what he told himself when he stumbled upon the old Victorian house at the edge of town. It wasn't on his usual Saturday morning route, but the sign yard sale, "Everything Must Go," had drawn him in. The front yard was filled with dusty antiques, mismatched furniture, and boxes stacked with books. An old man, thin as bone and with sunken eyes, sat behind a table. His hands trembled slightly as he accepted money from another customer. James walked past old lamps, faded paintings, and a grandfather clock that didn't tick. Then he saw it. A wooden box about the size of a jewelry case. It was hand-carved, intricate, with strange symbols etched into its surface. "How much for the box?" James asked. The old man's eyes flicked to the item in his hands. For a moment, he hesitated, then sighed. "Take it, just take it." James raised an eyebrow. "For free?" The old man nodded. "But listen, do not open it." James smirked. "Why? Is it cursed?" The old man didn't laugh. His lips trembled slightly. "Just don't open it, son. Some things should stay locked away." James should have listened. That night, James placed the box on his coffee table. He had no intention of leaving it shut forever. The old man was probably just playing a game, trying to build up some mystery. After a few beers, curiosity got the better of him. He ran his fingers over the carvings. The symbols felt warm to the touch. The wood almost pulsated beneath his hands. He hesitated, a flicker of doubt crossing his mind. Then, with a soft click, he lifted the lid. At first, nothing happened. Inside, there was only a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. He unfolded it carefully, his heart picking up speed as he read the words scrawled in black ink. "What was given must be returned. The price will be paid in full." James frowned. Weird. Then his TV flickered. The lights dimmed for a second. A shadow moved across the room. A chill ran down his spine. Someone was in the house. James stood, his breath uneven. His apartment wasn't big, one bedroom, one bathroom, nowhere to hide. Yet he felt watched. He checked the door. Still locked. The windows? Shut. He grabbed his phone, hands shaking slightly. Maybe it was just his imagination until he turned back and saw it. The box. It was closed again. His stomach dropped. He knew he had left it open. Then the whisper came. "Return what was taken." James spun around. Nothing. His heart pounded. The air felt thick, suffocating. He grabbed the box and shoved it into a drawer, slamming it shut. Maybe it was just the beer messing with his head. But sleep wouldn't come easy that night. And by the time he woke up, the box was back on the coffee table. Open. James barely made it through work the next day. His head throbbed, his stomach churned. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw figures in the dark, whispering in voices that weren't human. By evening, he was desperate. He grabbed the box and drove back to the old Victorian house. But when he got there, the house was abandoned. The yard sale? Gone. Windows boarded up. Dust-covered porch. A for sale sign hung loosely from a rusted chain. James stood there, heart hammering. The old man had been here, just yesterday. A woman passing by noticed his confusion. Looking at that old house? No one's lived there for years." James turned pale. "That's not possible. There was a yard sale here yesterday. An old man was selling stuff." The woman frowned. "You must be mistaken. The last owner died 20 years ago." James felt dizzy. He stumbled back to his car, the box still clutched in his hands. Something was very, very wrong. That night, James did everything he could to get rid of the box. He tried to burn it, the flames wouldn't touch it. He tried to smash it, it didn't even crack. He even drove to the river and threw it in. When he got home, it was waiting on his bed. The whispers grew louder. Shadows moved where there should be none. Every time he looked in the mirror, his reflection lagged, as if something else was trying to replace him. Then, at 3 a.m., his phone buzzed. No caller ID. With shaking hands, he answered. Static. Then, a voice. The price must be paid. A knock came from his bedroom door. Not his front door, his bedroom door. His breath hitched. He wasn't alone. Slowly, the door creaked open. A tall, skeletal figure stood there, hollow eyes locked onto him. Its fingers were too long, its grin too wide. James couldn't move, couldn't scream. The figure stepped forward. The last thing he heard before everything went black was a voice whispering in his ear. You took what wasn't yours. Now we take you. Weeks later, another yard sale appeared. A young woman named Claire stopped by, scanning the items. And there, among the dusty old trinkets, she saw it. A small wooden box. The seller, an old woman this time, smiled faintly as Claire picked it up. How much? Claire asked. The old woman shook her head. Just take it, dear. Buddy, don't open it. Claire chuckled. What? Is it cursed? The old woman didn't laugh. And somewhere, deep within the box, a voice chuckled softly. The price must always be paid. Darren loved yard sales. Something about finding lost treasures in other people's junk gave him a thrill. The old, the forgotten, the things that held stories. That's what led him to the Oakwood estate sale one crisp autumn morning. The house, a Victorian relic, had been abandoned for decades. Yet today, the front yard was filled with furniture, old books, and trinkets laid out like they had just been placed there yesterday. No dust. No decay. Almost as if time had paused. Darren felt a shiver crawl down his spine. A frail woman in black stood by the table, watching him with pale, almost colorless eyes. Her expression was blank, her presence unsettling. These belong to my family, she said softly. Take what calls to you. Darren scanned the items, feeling an odd sense of déjà vu. Then, he saw a tan old leather-bound journal with initials burned into the cover. DM, his own initials. He hesitated. Who did this belong to? The woman's lips barely moved. A man who liked to collect things that did not belong to him. Something in her voice made Darren's stomach turn, but he brushed it off. It was just a book. He should have walked away. Back home, Darren settled into his armchair and flipped open the journal. At first, the pages were blank, yellowed with age, but untouched. Then, the ink began to appear, letter by letter, word by word, forming right before his eyes. If you are reading this, then you are already marked. Darren's breath hitched. He flipped the page. We are watching you. We are waiting. And soon we will take you. His fingers trembled as he snapped the book shut. It had to be some kind of trick. Invisible ink? Old magic? His mind raced for a rational answer, but deep inside, a primal part of him knew something was very, very wrong. Then, from the corner of the room, he heard it. A whisper. Soft. Unintelligible. Coming from the book. The pages fluttered open on their own, and Darren saw a new line of text appearing right in front of him. Do not ignore us. The lights flickered. And for the first time in his life, Darren felt truly afraid. The next day, he tried to return the journal. He drove back to the Oakwood estate, but when he arrived, the house was gone. Not empty. Not abandoned. Just gone. As if it had never existed. Darren stood frozen, his heart pounding. The address had been real. The house had been there yesterday. Then, in the distance, he saw her. The woman in black. Standing at the end of the street. Motionless. Watching. He took a step toward her, but the moment he blinked, she was gone. Something cold settled in his bones. He wasn't alone. He could feel something following him. And when he got home, his reflection in the mirror lagged. Just for a second, but enough for him to notice. Enough for him to understand that he was being watched. That night, Darren sat on his bed, gripping the journal with white-knuckled hands. He had to get rid of it. Burn it. Destroy it. But a voice in his head whispered, "You took what wasn't yours. Now, you belong to us." The air in his bedroom grew thick, heavy. His ears rang. His vision blurred. Then, the shadows in the corners of the room moved. They stretched, crawled toward him with too many hands, too many fingers. Darren tried to scream, but no sound came out. The figures surrounded him. He saw their faces warped, hollow-eyed, their mouths stitched shut with black thread. They were the previous owners of the book. People who had made the same mistake. People who had read what was never meant to be read. One of them leaned in close. Its breath was cold as death. And then he heard its whisper. Welcome to the collection. Weeks later, another yard sale appeared. A young woman named Emily wandered through the rows of forgotten trinkets, looking for something interesting. And there, among the old books and rusted antiques, she saw it. A leather-bound journal with initials burned into the cover. E.M., her own initials. She hesitated. Who did this belong to? The seller, a frail woman in black, gave a thin smile. A collector, but not anymore. Emily picked up the book, running her fingers over its worn cover. And deep inside the journal, a whisper stirred. Waiting. Watching. For its next soul. Nathan Carter wasn't superstitious. He prided himself on being practical, logical. A man who believed in good deals, not ghost stories. That's why, when he stumbled upon an old-fashioned yard sale on the outskirts of town, he didn't think twice before stopping. The house was ancient, its once white paint now peeling like dead skin. The yard was cluttered with relics from another era-ornate mirrors, dusty clocks, rusted tools, and wooden chests locked tight with thick iron clasps. But what caught Nathan's eye was the music box. It sat on an antique table, small and elegant, carved from dark mahogany with gold inlay. A strange symbol was etched into the top one he didn't recognize. When he turned the small crank, the box emitted a melody unlike anything he had ever heard. Not sweet, not nostalgic, something hollow, off-tune, almost wrong. A woman's voice, brittle and hoarse, cut through the air. "That's not for sale." Nathan turned. An old woman stood in the doorway, dressed in a black shawl that hung off her frail frame. Her eyes, sunken and clouded, locked onto his hands. Nathan smiled, ever the charmer. "Everything is for sale, isn't it?" She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Yes, but the price is higher than you think. How much?" She studied him for a long time before saying, $5. Nathan scoffed. "A beautiful antique for only $5? Too good to pass up." Too bad he didn't ask why. As he walked away, the woman whispered something, but the wind swallowed her words before they could reach him. That night, Nathan placed the music box on his nightstand. He turned the crank once more, letting the eerie melody fill the room. It made his skin prickle. The notes felt wrong, as if they were being played backward, notes stretched too long, too slow. Then, at exactly midnight, he woke up. The music box was playing on its own. Nathan sat up, heart hammering. He hadn't wound it up, but there it was spinning, playing that same distorted, haunting tune. Then, from the dark corner of his bedroom, he heard it. A voice. "Thank you for letting me in." The whisper was slow, crawling into his ears like an insect. Nathan's breath hitched. His room felt smaller, the air thick and damp. The shadows in the corners stretched, shifting like something was moving within them. Then, as quickly as it started, the music stopped. The room was silent. Nathan reached for the box, fingers trembling, and turned it over. There was an inscription underneath, one that hadn't been there before. "One song, one soul. The bargain is made." Over the next few nights, things got worse. It started small. Nathan waking up to find the music box open. His bedroom door cracked ajar even though he'd locked it. Then he began seeing things. Shapes in the mirrors. Reflections that didn't move when he did. A shadow standing at the end of the hallway, always just out of focus. The whispers grew louder. Sometimes they sounded like a woman. Other times, something else. Something not human. One night, he heard soft footsteps outside his bedroom door. He held his breath, eyes locked on the door handle, watching, waiting. Then, it turned. Slowly. Deliberately. Nathan lunged forward, flinging the door open. Nothing was there. Just the hallway. Empty. Silent. But when he turned back to his room, the music box was open again. Nathan finally went back to the yard sale house, but it was gone. Not abandoned. Not burned down. It had never existed. He asked neighbors. No one remembered an old woman living there. No one remembered a yard sale. Desperate, he did research, digging through old town records. And that's when he found it. The house had stood there over 100 years ago. And the last owner? A woman named Margaret Holloway, who had been accused of witchcraft and cursed objects before disappearing in 1913. She had been known for selling music boxes. Music boxes that played by themselves. Music boxes that were said to steal the souls of those who played them. Nathan's blood ran cold. He raced home, grabbed the cursed object, and tried to burn it. But the flames refused to touch it. No matter what he did smashing it, throwing it in the river, the box always returned to his nightstand by midnight. And each night, the whispers got closer. Nathan didn't sleep anymore. He saw her, now the woman in black, standing in the corners, watching, waiting. And then, one night, he heard the final whisper. The song must continue. That night, neighbors reported hearing a horrible melody playing from Nathan's house. By morning, he was gone. His house was empty, except for the music box, sitting perfectly on the nightstand, waiting for the next owner. Weeks later, a woman named Elena found herself at a small estate sale on the outskirts of town. She sifted through the trinkets, her fingers brushing over an old music box. She turned the crank, letting the haunting melody play. A frail woman behind the table watched her carefully. "That's not for sale," she whispered. Elena smiled. "Everything has a price." The woman hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, but the price is higher than you think. Some bargains should never be made."